It's recording.
Yeah.
Thank you. Put the hammer down. And I don't mean go faster. Hi everybody. Sorry, it's noisy around here today. Dogs are excitable. Dryer's going. Husband's painting. We got a lot of stuff happening. Anyway, hope it's not too bad because I need to really just record this and get it over with. We're going to finish up the trunks today. We're going to make them look all pretty fancy time on the inside and on the outside. So really, I've got nothing fun to talk about this week, so we're just going to get right into it. Let's go. As I mentioned in a previous video, these trunks are kind of old and beat up, and they're not exactly square everywhere. That makes just measuring for the pattern kind of hard to do. So I had to get a little bit creative. Here you see me slicing what is basically a capital I sort of shape so that I can fit this piece of paper over my trunk handle. What I'm trying to accomplish here is being able to lay this paper as flush as possible against the majority of the surface. So I'll be cutting these little eye shapes anywhere that there's something that sticks up, like over the latches, handles, all of that stuff. My assistant here wishes to remain anonymous, so we're just going to pretend that they're a pastel cloud today. I'm only going to be patterning off half of the trunk, and then I will be basically making a mirror image of that, and then kind of just fussing with it after that to make sure everything fits in place. That might not make a whole lot of sense right now, but you'll see what I mean as we go. So after I've got my paper where I can pretty much lay it flush against the surface here, I'm going to start taping it in place so it doesn't shift around as I do the next few steps. You see I found a spot I missed that I needed to cut for the better fit. After I get this all taped down, what I'm going to do is take this ink pen and I'm going to go around feeling for all the metal, like the flashing edges and all the little detail pieces. And I'm going to feel for those with my fingernail and kind of press it into the paper with my fingernail, and then I'm going to follow behind it with the ink pen. And a lot of the times doing that, the ink pen will cut right through the paper and there's really no need to cut after that. Any place it doesn't cut though, I will either be using that utility knife you see laying there, or I will be using a pair of scissors. This part might sound complicated, but it's really pretty straightforward if you just watch what I'm doing. And here I'm just doing the exact same thing to the lid portion of the front. And here's the pattern I made. And as I said, this is only half, so I'm going to double it and mirror it. But before I do that, I'm going to decide how wide I want the fake wood panel pieces and how wide I want the fake leather panel pieces. Here I'm using a template from the top of the trunk where I've already decided those widths. And it's just going to help me kind of figure out where I want to make the line to cut this pattern further. This way it'll be consistent on the top of the trunk and the front of the trunk. Now that I've decided my placement, I'm just going to make this mark right across the pattern pieces I've made, and I will be cutting along that line. If you think you might get confused about what pattern piece is what and how it fits together, you should probably either number them or label them so that you can keep track. I find about the easiest way to cut a straight line is to use a ruler and a razor. Now I'm just taping back together where I cut that capital I kind of shape to get it to fit around the handle because I'm not going to need that. Now we take a piece of paper and fold it in half and lay the pattern right here on the fold. And as you can see, I've got the little central latch piece facing toward the fold. Now I'm just going to trace this out and then I'll be cutting it. This pattern piece is going to be on this fake leather. I find the easiest way to deal with this is just to lay my pattern directly on top of the back side and then trace my pattern onto the back side and cut it out. It's not going to matter at all. You won't be able to see the marker on the front side, and this just makes it a lot easier than trying to pin down or hold down a pattern while you're trying to cut. I also have two little leather pieces that fit inside the leather strip on the front side lid of the trunk. And in order to make these fit properly, they need to be mirrored. I only cut out one, remember, so I need to flip one over so that I have one that fits on each side properly. Again, I know saying some of this verbally sounds kind of confusing, but I'm pretty sure it's all going to make sense as you see me putting it together. Sorry, guys. Anywhere the edges might look a little wonky, like maybe you didn't cut it straight or trace it straight, just use a ruler and kind of shore those up. Make sure you do that before you cut the cloth. These little kind of, I don't know, planchette looking pieces that I'm cutting out right here, these are the attachments for the handles. And if you pay attention, I'm going to be cutting an opening really close to the edge on both of these. And that is going to make it where I can fit this around that attached handle. That's the part I'm talking about. See that? Now that I've got the leather pieces cut out, I'm going to be cutting out the contact paper parts. This is some black wood grain paper I got from Amazon. And again, I'm just kind of smoothing out the edges where I got a rough cut. That's the one downside of the ink pen cutting the paper as you trace. And I'm going to handle this fairly similarly to how I did with the leather. I'm just going to trace the pattern directly onto the back side. The way I'm doing this, there is going to be like a leather strip down the middle and wood grain on either side of that. So with this top front lid piece, I'm going to again mirror it and cut out two of those. And then I will do the same thing with the front side piece here. The top of the trunk's a bit more straightforward, so I didn't worry showing you guys that. It's pretty much the same process. And speaking of the top, since it is more straightforward, that's where we're going to be starting. I have my piece of contact paper cut to the basic size I want. It's a little bit bigger, but not much, and you'll see why in a minute. For placing contact paper, it's easier if you go along one edge and kind of make a fold in the backing, like you see me doing right here. And then start off with just that little edge you've exposed and stick that in place first. Once you get that little edge stuck in place, you can start slowly pulling away the backing from underneath, and as you go, you smooth on the contact paper. And right here is why it was just slightly bigger, because it has all these little detail metal pieces, and I did the same thing again. I just kind of traced those out with my fingernail, and then I came along with the razor and I'm going to cut them free. We repeat the process on the other side of the trunk. And now for this middle part that we didn't cover with the wood grain contact paper, this is where we're going to be putting our fake leather. I'm sticking it down with some E6000 for long-term hold and a little bit of hot glue on there just to hold it in place as the E6000 cures. Now I'll go around and trim up any of the places where the trunk wasn't quite square and the pieces didn't quite fit. After that, I'm going to add some trim to kind of delineate between the leather and the wood, and also just to kind of cover up the raw edges. You have a lot of choices for what you can use here, but I'm always trying to be cheap and use up supplies I already had. And I already had some of this gimp cord left over from a different project, a sewing project, and I thought it would be cute, so I went ahead and tried using it. All I'm doing here is just gluing it right down along the seam. I do that on both sides. And now moving on to the difficult part, the front. You can see as I'm putting it on exactly why I left those little slits like I told you. That makes it so I can put this down around the handle well. And again, there are some parts that are going to need trimming up because nothing on this trunk is exactly even, and I cut out a pattern that was exactly even. So I slowly and carefully trim up the pieces to fit. Then we're just going to kind of do the same process we did with the top. We're going to put down the contact paper first. And as you can see, I've cut a little slit where the little latch is, and that is for pretty much the same purpose as we did it when we were trying to trace out our pattern. That's so I can easily smooth down the paper around it. And I'm working my way up from the bottom towards the top. And as I go, I'm going to feel with my fingernail and then cut the contact paper loose. Again, just watching me is probably going to be better than me trying to describe it with words. And I will do this process to both sides and also the sides of the top of the trunk. Or the sides of the lid top. You know what I mean. You'll see. These parts, these are what I was talking about. And then, just like the top with the leather, we're going to do the E6000 and hot glue. It's a little more tricky because this has a bit more, I don't know, complexity to the cut. It's not just a square, but just take your time and go slow and you'll get it on there. And I'm going to add the gimp cording to the front as well. When you finish, if you notice some bumps in your contact paper, just kind of poke a little hole like this. You can use a needle or, the tip of a razor, and then you just smush the bubble toward the hole you made, and it will help lay that down flat against your surface. And here I'm just covering the sides and the back with wood contact paper. I'm not doing the designs on the sides and on the back. I only did that on the top and the front. Now we're going to do the inside. I picked up these 3 rolls of wrapping paper from Dollar Tree, and honestly, you can use all kinds of different materials, or you could just use sturdier paper, like, probably some scrapbook paper might have been a little bit better choice, but I'm trying to be cheap here. I always am. So I just cut these into a bunch of random size little squares, and I'm going to use my Mod Podge. And this also works out really well because of that whole thing where nothing is squared up on this trunk. It makes it a lot easier when you can just place little pieces in as you need. So I'm just laying down a layer of Mod Podge and randomly sticking on the random little squares. And when this is all covered, I'm going to go over it with another layer of Mod Podge. My main goal with doing this was that I don't know what has been in this trunk, so even with it being cleaned out, I'm still not super secure putting a bunch of blankets and stuff in there, which is what I'm going to do. So I wanted to make sure it was nice and sealed up. So this is why I thought it was important to do the inside of the trunk. And yes, I picked a lot of cutesy pastel colors because I was like, haha, look, it's like me. It looks all dark and creepy on the outside, but it's all super pastel, cutesy fun time on the inside. Oh my gosh. And since this video is running longer than I was expecting it was going to, I'm just going to be doing this trunk this week. I'll be showing you the next trunk next week, or maybe later this week if I get around to it. We'll see. And I mean, that's just assuming any of you have even made it this far. I try to keep my videos shorter than this, I promise. So yeah, about here I decided you probably got the idea. I tried to put it in fast forward so you kind of got to watch the process. And here is the trunk all finished up. I'll try to give you a little bit of a close-up look, you know, some beauty shots. This is really useful and I really like the way it turned out. I think it's super pretty. It's pretty much exactly what I was going for. Pretty proud of it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you like and subscribe for more and, you know, try to stick with me, guys. See you next weekend.